Good evening and welcome to another episode of Law and Order. Last week we did discuss about child abuse, what child abuse is, what are the offenses of child abuse, who can create a child abuse, and what are the actions taken by the law to prevent this type of child abuse. And we talked a lot of detail with Mr. Harshana Nanakara, a senior attorney at law, and he's joining us today also to go further on this topic of child abuse, which is really vast, and we would like all our viewers to join us to find out more in detail with Mr. Harshana. Good evening to you.
Good evening.
We did talk about how the law applies on child abuse as we wound up on our previous episode, Harshana. So I would now like to come into the point. You did mention about the penal codes for various acts of child abuse, but what are the punishments that can be related into child abuse, from sexual harassment to cruelty to whatever? So if you can give me a detailed description of that.
Yeah. So basically, as I told you, I mean, when on the last occasion, if you recall, I mean, I just said about 10, 15 different offences. So I mean, for an example, most of the offences have a minimum sentence of 2 years and a maximum sentence of 10 years, right? For an example, obscene publications or exhibition relating to children. Now, if we come to cruelty to children, as I explained to you under the penal code, it has about minimum 2 years, maximum 10 years. So when it comes to hiring children as prostitutes or procuration, it could be again between 2 to 10 years. But sexual exploitation of children, it could be minimum sentence is 5 and the maximum is 20. So just like that, there are various in the tariff, like if it's a rape, if it is statutory rape, minimum sentence is 10 years. That is someone under the age of 16, even if there is consent. But now there is a problem. No, the problem is, now there were 2 Supreme Court cases that was decided saying that rule minimum sentence of 10 years does not apply. That means it could be anything even less than 10. It could even be a suspended term. A suspended term is where they don't go to prison at all, but they are being told if they stay in good behavior 5 years, their sentence won't operate. So we can have a situation which.
So just to interrupt you, so when you say good lifestyle in 5 years is among the society, is it? Or
without committing any offence.
Without committing any offence.
It's like this. The court will say most probably a thing like 2 years imprisonment suspended for 5 years. That means he been given a 2-year prison term, but the operation of that prison term is suspended for 5 years. So during that 5 years, he can't commit any other offence, a criminal offence. If he does, then that 2 years will start becoming operational together with the new one.
So when you say criminal offence, it doesn't have to be child abuse itself. It can
Anything
be any criminal offence.
Any criminal offence, as opposed to a civil offence, like a breach of contract. So therefore, to get your point, before the 1995 amendment to the penal code, our sentencing was very relaxed when it comes to child abuse. But because of the importance given after 1995 and the idea of having to punish and deter the offenders, we come across most of these offences have serious sentencing. But the judges do have a discretion now because of those new case authorities as to what sentence they could give.
So it really differs from the offence to offence of the child abuse.
Offence to offence, and also the circumstances. Some circumstances are far more worse than a normal one. Let's assume there's a 19-year-old boy who engages in sexual intercourse with a 15-year-old because they are boyfriend and girlfriend, right? Now those circumstances doesn't justify the boy being sent for 10 years. No. But again, it will be different if another man, 30 or 35 or 40, come keep a knife on her neck and threaten her. Now those circumstances will justify a aggravated sentence. So now the sentence will vary based on those.
Now coming to this, we were talking about a 19-year-old and a 15-year-old being boyfriend and girlfriend. So what would happen if the both parties have done this sexual engagement willingly, and it's the parents who come in with a complaint saying that this my daughter has been abused, then how does this all apply?
Well, it's a good question, because I very specifically said the word 19, because now when you're a 19-year-old boy, you're an adult. Now we know whatever the law says, when children grow up at the age of 15, 14, 15, they have boyfriends and they might engage in intercourse, who knows. That amounts to what you call statutory rape. That means, as you know, in normal rape offences, if there is consent by the girl, it is not rape, it's not an offence. But in the case of children, because they need to be protected, the law says if you are under the age of 16, even if you consent, still that boy is committing an
Crime.
offence, a crime. So that's how it happens. So the law says minimum sentence is 10 years, which is not applicable anymore. So it's still an offence. So I think young boys must understand when they get about with their girlfriends what they are supposed to be doing.
Yeah. So we talked about these crimes, what are the offences and how the law reacts. But then when it comes to prevention of this, does the law itself get involved in the prevention of child abuse, or is it among the society that it really creates the prevention part of child?
Well, actually, my answer will be twofold, please. It's like this. Now, we have lot of procedures and offences when a harm has come upon a child. All the offences I spoke to you were them. No? That means once the harm has come upon a child, how to punish the adult offender. And when you punish an adult offender, we are hoping and praying the society will be deterred not to commit harm on children. But we don't have any set of laws or regulations aimed at prevention. Now there's a law called Children's and Young Persons Ordinance, which deals with how to handle children who are in need of care and protection and juvenile offenders. But even in that law, which is specifically designed for children, does not have a section on how to prevent. So therefore, the need of the moment is to come up with a legal regime focused on prevention. So that new law designed must cast a duty on the public on certain occasions to report offences. Otherwise, it will amount to an offence. But that alone won't be enough, because remember, these kind of offences are not things that happens like a traffic accident where everyone to see. Right? It's not like you killed someone in a fight. All these offences do happen in secrecy. So, but what is the best way to prevent it? Because we can't keep a police officer at every house. We can't keep a courthouse next to every house. Then we must educate the child. We must give them sex education. We must make them understand what their body is. We must make them understand. Schools must understand how to protect these children. In the sense, the children must be empowered. They must be taught in an age-appropriate manner what amounts to abuse. So they know, firstly, that their body is theirs and no one can touch it. That is number one. Secondly, when children are very small, as I told you in a previous show, they will not know that abuse is happening to them. But suddenly you will feel in the classroom, if you take them, they'll be very distant, right? They will be ignoring their homework. Suddenly their dress sense has all gone. They are not clean, or they are just, thinking all the time. Now these are all indications of a child going through a traumatic period.
Going into a shell.
Going into a shell or being completely distant. I'm just giving you a few examples. Yes. Then what do we need? We need teachers, village elders, family, you call Grama Sevakas or Pradeshya secretaries or whoever. When they see a child, they should have some training. Those who are dealing with children must have some training to detect when a child is going through a traumatic experience and identify it and report to the relevant authorities for help. So I think prevention can happen only by three ways actually. First, have a regime of law focusing on prevention, which we don't have. Two, educate the children, give them sex education and make them understand about their body and the sanctity. Three, sensitize all the adults who are working with children who can detect things. So that is the only way to prevent. And we always say prevention in this case is far better than the cure, because all the laws we talk about, all these news items you read on paper, it's all after the harm has happened to the child. The child is emotionally damaged. and you cannot have emotionally damaged children growing up to be adults. So prevention is very important, and those are my observations.
You did mention about juvenile offenders. So when you say juvenile offenders, obviously the offender is under the age of 18.
Yeah,
So even a juvenile offender can create a child abuse,
they can.
a crime of child abuse.
They can.
So how would the law act on a juvenile offender? Will it be the same of the sentences that you mentioned previously?
Well, it's like this. When you say juvenile offender, not only sexual offences, no. They can commit other offences such as theft or something. But in Sri Lanka, fortunately, we don't have a serious juvenile offender issue problem. In some European states or America, you can see juvenile offenders carrying guns and doing bank robberies and a lot of stuff. Here what we have are petty thefts, or adults using these children for drug trafficking or something along those lines. So if you come to sexual offence, it's quite possible for a 15-year-old boy or 16-year-old boy to commit a sexual offence on a 10-year-old, male or female, doesn't make a difference. Now in those instances, that also will be considered as an offence, true. But the sentencing, the law itself says you can even just warn and discharge, even a suspended term, not a problem. They don't have to be put into prison. But in those instances, Attorney General, fortunately for us, is very careful. They will see what kind of offence that has happened. Are they girlfriend, boyfriend? All those things will be taken into account. And sometimes it is better not to prosecute the young offender for those offences. I did a research in Gaul. Funny thing, when I did the research, I came across all that boy has done, gone near the house of the girl and shouted, "I love you," near the gate. This was a case in Gaul. In Sinhalese, he would have done that, right? Then the mother calls 119. Police come and arrest and put the boy into the, not prison, I mean to the courthouse. Yeah. But I mean, police shouldn't have done that. And another instance where the boy has given a love letter by hand to the child, and the mother saw that and complained. They arrested the boy and produced him in court under section 345 for sexual harassment. So we have to be sensitive about it. When a child commits an offence, you can't just automatically put them into court. I mean, if a 15-year-old boy is not going to shout at a girl saying, "I love you," who else is going to do that? Kausala? You and I. I don't think you and I will do that.
My mind runs back 25 years backwards, Harshana, where there was an instant where there was a child, age 16 or 17, who committed a crime by killing his own parents. How does this type of an act come in?
Even if you're under 16, now when you say 16, 17 is a bit of an issue, but even under 16, the child will have to be tried for murder, But the punishment will be different depending whether he is under the age of 16 or over the age of 16. Children's and Young Persons Ordinance that I spoke to you considers above 16 is an adult. That means Children's and Young Persons Procedure does not apply. That is because that law was created in 1939 based on the English law we had at that time. Now, England themselves have changed that law to 5 or 6 different times. So, however, if you are under the age of 16 when you commit the crime, they cannot be given the death penalty. But they can be detained for a long while, but they cannot be given the death penalty.
So, death penalty and lifetime imprisonment will not apply to this,
no,
but there will be a long sentence like 20 years imprisonment or
something depending, and also with space for the minister in charge or the authority in charge to release the child on probation, because when they're so small, you have to look at all the circumstances. Why did it happen? Now, it's quite possible it happened as a matter of provocation. It's quite possible that the child has been abused regularly by the parents and finally the child retaliated. All those factors will be considered when you are sentencing or reducing the sentence or releasing early. So, which we can't say. But however, the child, if it's under 16, will still be tried for murder, but will not be given the death penalty.
Convicted but not given the death penalty?
No, not if you're under 16, no.
Yeah. So, you did mention about a very interesting thing of adoption and how it all should work around when you talked about how prevention happens. So, if you can elaborate a little bit on what you really mean by this adoption.
Adoption.
Yeah.
The adoption process, let me explain. Before adoption, I will explain the whole theme of child protection, as I have told you on a previous occasion, is to make sure the child does not get separated from their biological family. That separation mainly happens in this country due to poverty. For an example, the mother going to Dubai to work as a housemaid, right? And then the father sends the child as a servant, or the father suddenly passes away, then the mother sends the child as a servant or to work somewhere. Now, these are the ways a child could be separated. So, first thing that we try as a policy, I mean the Department of Probation and Childcare, is to provide various kind of financial support or counseling to keep them together. Now, if that fails and still the child is separated, then we look at how long that breakup is. For an example, if the mother has gone to Korea or Dubai or somewhere, going to come back in 2 years' time, then the child will be given what we call a fit person order. It's like a foster care order. An adult will look after the child, a relative or aunt or someone, under the supervision of the court. The third option is what we call adoption. Adoption is where the break of the family is complete. It cannot be put back together. So, therefore, a couple or a single person could come and do an adoption. So, in adoption, the child will get a family. That means the child is in a family environment. We can adopt children up to the age of 14. Above 14, you can't adopt. I think the law should change. It should be 18, but the law says 14 in 1979. So, adoption, fit person foster order, all assures that the child is within a family environment. The last option we use is institutionalization, putting a child in a home. Everybody thinks a home is good for these poor children, they'll get their food and everything. Believe me, even the best run home is not a suitable place for a child. It doesn't allow a child to develop their personality. I know we need homes because there are certain instances there's nothing you can do. You have to put them in a home. But the idea is that if you put a child into a home, you must always look at the fastest method of reintegrating that child back into society. Very important, because your personality does not develop there. You become an automaton. Your personality slacks. So that's why I was against some of these children homes. They call themselves, you know what they call themselves? Child development centers. I'm against that word. How can a child develop in a home? It can never happen. So adoption is something that is done by the district court. If there are parents who are desirous of adopting a child, they could go to the district court and follow the procedure and provide a home to a child.
We did talk about children who get, especially female children who get sexually harassed, coming into rape, being used as prostitution, and then when they're identified. So, is there a process in Sri Lanka where they are being sent into, like, I wouldn't say rehabilitation, but then a process where they can really overcome this, because sometimes going back to their homes, or sometimes those children might not even have proper homes.
Yeah.
How does this work?
This is a serious problem because you see, I mean, first of all, children, there are certain children, when you are victimized, you can get over it fast. That is the case when you are going on the road, a stranger come and attacks you, and then when you change your area and when you go to another new area, you feel safe. But if the victim is someone in your family who continues to abuse you, they will have a problem. So, firstly, they don't need to be rehabilitated, but they need to be having counseling, some emotional help. In our ancient village system, we had a good family network and support. Now we don't, but there are professional counselors who will help them to overcome the fears and the anxieties. As I told you, damage has been done, but it is not widely available for everybody. And again, that is not to say that every child needs counseling also, because some will be resilient enough to face it. But the whole idea is that they need to be helped to overcome this with some form of counseling. Rehabilitation not needed. Those who need rehabilitation are offenders, young offenders. Again, our offenders don't need rehabilitation. Mostly they steal food because they're hungry. What we need is a fair distribution of wealth in this country.
Oh, so what happens if, like, for example, a child who is being forced into taking illegal drugs and is possessed by it and turns out to be a drug addict, then where do you take that child?
There are two aspects of your question. One thing is, whenever a child, most of the children who are under the age of 16, well, some of them may be drug addicts, some of them may not be, but they are generally used by the adults to commit the offence. And the penal code says using a child to transport prohibited articles is also a separate offence. But fortunately for us, the Attorney General considers those things. If the evidence shows the child does not know what's in this parcel, or child knows what's in the parcel, but the father said, take it and give it to that uncle. Now that will be drug trafficking. But in those instances, I am sure the AG does not charge those children unless it's very necessary. So therefore, we are trying to protect children as much as we can, provided we know that their involvement is involuntary or innocent, right? However, if they are drug addicts, I mean, then of course, you know, other issues will take and they will have to go to rehabilitation. And now there's this new drug called ICE. It's not like when we were younger what you had the cannabis or the heroin. Now they are even being sold all over the place from media I see. They come in various forms. They call it ICE or they come as lollies. And believe me, you want to protect children? No laws are enough. But one thing can protect children. If the parents spend enough time talking to children, when they say spend time with children, many of us adults think, ah yes, we spend all the evening with children. No, children are watching a TV or pressing a tab. The adult and mother or father watching teledrama. Of course, they're in the same living area, but there's no communication, right? If you want to protect children, there must be a fabulous relationship, a discussion between children and parents. But it doesn't happen. That's why children have to go to outsiders for that communication, and that's where the abuse happens.
I think that's a very good point that you pointed out on how you can protect your children. Well, they all say that it all starts at home. I think that's exactly where it needs to start. So, Mr. Archana, I would like to ask you, what is the first step of a person? Like, does Sri Lanka have a place called the Child Protection Authority or a bureau where if you're abused, where do the person go firstly?
Yeah, that's the thing. Now, this country has various layers, confusing administrative layers in all sorts of things, right? So we also have the same thing. For an example, juvenile justice is a subject for the central government. They can make laws of it. But when it comes to protection and care, then it's a provincial council subject. So the Department of Probation looks into that. So when it comes to actual abuse and everything, probation commissioners or the probation department. But if it's prevention, it's done by child rights promotion officers who are central government servants. So the confusion is all over. But I'll try to explain to your viewer. What happens normally is that any police can entertain a criminal complaint from a child. But now in almost all stations island-wide, now we have a women's and a children's desk. Because those officers are well trained, or at least they're supposed to be well trained, to talk to children and record complaints. It's not easy, to talk to a child and get something out. They are not going to sit here and talk like you and I with the correct words. So we have children's desk. So if it happened in Anuradhapura or somewhere, when you go to the police station, in the same police station, you have the women's and children's desk. That is one. Second layer is the Department of Probation and Child Care. They are based provincially. They are the ones who oversee and monitor orphanages. They are the ones who provide substantial services for children who are in need of care and protection, or filing reports with regard to offending children. That is in a provincial level. So at the national level, we have the National Department of Probation and Child Care, who handles international adoptions and policies. But for me, the most important, all of them are important, it is the National Child Protection Authority. They have been doing very good work all these years. Now, National Child Protection Authority is the policy making body. They are the umbrella organization. They are supposed to liaise with all ministries with regard to law, whether it's labor or justice. They are supposed to liaise. They are supposed to collect data, formulate policy, prevention, no matter what. NCPA is called the National Child Protection Authority, right? So now what happens? People, some of them, they go and complain to the police of the area, then they go to the National Child Protection Authority also. There's duplication. Or they go to the Women's and Children's Bureau and then go to the NCPA. Duplication. So I hope and pray. So these are the three layers we have. That's the National Child Protection Authority at the top.
Right, I think that's been very clear. So where you need to go first, the National Child Authority Protection is where you need to go first if you are a victim of child abuse?
I'm sorry, not necessarily. You
Yeah.
can go to the police of the area
Okay, right.
as well. Sorry.
Right. So there you go. I think we've had a very in detail discussion about child abuse in our previous program and today's program. We had how the prevention process work and how a victimized child abuse person can be adopted, been civilized and brought back into society thanks to a very detailed explanation from our attorney at law here this evening, Mr. Harshan Nanakara. So thank you very much for joining us and giving us all this insight of a very important topic.
Thank you very much for having me, Kosan.
Well, with that, we come to the conclusion of another episode of Law and Order. Hope you had a very in detail description about child abuse. So we shall meet again with our next episode of Law and Order. Till then, it's goodbye.